we are live. Martina, we have already 50 people that were in the waiting room, and more people are about to join. So we're gonna, have a slow way of entering the conversation to allow people to come in. As you probably know, the topic of product marketing is a topic of growing interest in the French community, and I have to say, from a personal standpoint, it's both a pleasure and an honor, to have you today. It's a high privilege to be able to go into the depth of all your experience and thinking around the topic. So, just for that, thank you, Martina.
It's my pleasure.
We can start maybe with one very open question, which is, who are you, Martina?
Who am I? I'm a middle child. I'm number two of four. I have a German mother and a Filipino father, so I definitely lived in a multicultural world. And I had my older sister was absolutely brilliant. So I would say I spent the early part of my life just trying to equal the standards that she set. So she was amazing, and I give a lot of credit to who I am to her because she was just this incredible example.
If you go back to how you grew up, is there any hints that led you to who you are today from a professional standpoint? Is there any connection you could make looking backwards?
Yeah, actually, there's this really pivotal moment that I remember, and it was in 1984, and I was watching the Super Bowl with my family, and the very now iconic Macintosh ad came on television, and it was so remarkable, and I truly had never seen anything like it. It was the first 60-second spot, and it was done in this really unique way, revolutionary way. And I watched that, and I remember thinking at that moment, I have no idea what I just saw, but whatever that is what I want to do. Because I realized how much impact it had on me, someone who had no knowledge of this thing or whatever it was, but I just couldn't resist how curious I had become. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I had no idea what that was or what the difference between marketing or advertising. I had no clue. And but I pursued that path based on that one moment of influence.
And is it a coincidence that it was a moment of was like marketing applied to tech, right? So can you tear apart if it was the object that was being or the company that was being advertised, or was it the actual advertising technique that was like a shock to you?
At the time, it was much more the technique than it was the product. I did not consider myself to be technical. I had you asked me then, I would have said, "Oh, I'll be in entertainment in some way." I grew up in Los Angeles in Southern California, and that's the dominant industry there. So just felt very natural. Oh, I'll be in entertainment. So I would have assumed that I would have done something much more consumer oriented. And then actually my first job, so the one that really got me to where I am today, my first internship was actually in Germany, working for Kraft Europe as a product marketer for coffee new channels. And so it was the largest coffee manufacturer in Germany at the time. And the wall had just come down, and we were trying to figure out how to increase our coffee penetration in the eastern side of the country in novel channels like gas stations and kiosks. And that's where I really connected all the dots, saying, oh, this is business plus strategy plus marketing. And this is really interesting. And that's when I discovered product marketing.
Okay, okay. So today, one of the reasons why we're having this conversation is because you wrote a book. So technically, you did not write the book in French yourself, yet it has been translated in French. But now, the French, product marketing community has a Bible to refer to. The question I would have for you is, why did you write this book?
Very much for a lot of the reasons that we've been talking about, which is product marketing is actually a discipline. And what I realized in the last 30 years is most people don't understand that. They believe it's a role, a person that does some stuff at a company. And it really is a discipline. And when it's done really well, it is an enormous difference maker in how companies are able to succeed. And probably one of the more recent iconic examples of that is Salesforce, that crafted a position. On-premise software is dead. You have to be able to figure out what's happening in your sales organization in real time. You have to be in the cloud. That was a position, a mega trend that they talked about that let them then sell their software into that market position that they were crafting, saying this is happening in the world. And so people don't get that. And so I wanted people to understand the more foundational elements of what product marketing, the discipline is, so that wherever you sit and whatever you do, be a CEO, an executive, someone in the product organization, or someone who does product marketing, that you could understand what the role's foundational purpose is.
It's very interesting that you're making this distinction between the discipline and the role, because I was surprised when we announced that we're going to have the conversation today. I asked for people to gather questions, and I was surprised by the number of questions that were around the role, and in particularly trying to define the role almost in contrast with other role. How am I supposed to interact with a product manager? What is the interaction I should have with the head of sales, etc. And there were less questions on the actual discipline itself. Regardless of who does it, what's the discipline about? So do you have an idea why it seems like for this particular discipline, there's so much emphasis from the practitioners on the role that is supposed to embody it?
Yeah, I think because there's a tremendous amount of confusion in terms of how it's done. There are no two companies that practice product marketing exactly the same way. Like the edges of the role in companies vary. And I've truly not seen it practiced exactly the same way in any two companies. So that's part of why there are always so many questions. Well, how should I be interacting with this role? Because there's what you believe or the experience that you bring to what you think it should do or how it should behave. And then there's how it's working in that company. And I do believe that's why there are always so many questions, and rightly so, because it is somewhat fluid and it shifts over time in terms of its purpose and its forte based on the stage of the company and what its business goals are. So in the first 3 years of my career where I was at Microsoft, the product marketing aspect of the organization shifted where it reported, it shifted its focus, it expanded, it contracted, it was more product oriented, then it went more a line of business oriented. And that was just in 3 years. And this is for a mature software organization. So you can imagine for less mature software organizations, how much fluidity there would be. So that's why I expect there are always going to be questions.
Okay, that makes sense. Then if we take, if we try to look at what a company that is great at product marketing from the outside, how would you tell? Like if you were to, try to get a sense of whether or not this company is mature on product marketing, what are the things you would pay attention to? And how would you, tell the difference between a company that is super mature at this topic versus a company that maybe doesn't understand even what the whole concept is about?
So I think one of my favorite examples right now is a company that I have no relationship to whatsoever, but this is very much what does great look like from the outside? And I participate in a number of different marketing huddles, and this is the one, or workshops, and this is the one that comes up the most consistently as the best website, and it's Stripe right now, stripe.com. And the evidence of great product marketing is right there on the page. So financial infrastructure for the internet. Millions of companies of all sizes, from startups to Fortune 500s, use Stripe's software and APIs to accept payments, send payouts, and manage their businesses online. They could have said the most tightly integrated, unified internet infrastructure platform, payments infrastructure platform. We're the leading internet infrastructure payments platform, totally integrated. But they led with precisely what it is that they're doing in simpler language. That is great messaging. That's evidence of great product marketing. Or if you even scroll further down on their page, you have in little tiny language, unified platform. But in a bigger header, it says a fully integrated suite of payment products. There is a huge, great example. The word platform is used by everybody from small companies to large companies. Having the discipline to say exactly what it is that they are, a fully integrated suite of payment products from the customer's perspective, instead of saying declaring their category or they're technically what they are, which is an integrated unified platform for payments. That's evidence of more customer-centered product marketing, and that's strong product marketing.
So what I'm understanding is that what you're referring to right now, that the first thing maybe you would see is actually messaging. Is there a kind of an underlying notion of positioning as kind of the foundation of this crystal clear messaging that you would assume has been some, work done in order to reach this level of clarity?
Great question. And the four foundational principles that I talk about with product marketing in the book are, number one, the ambassador between customer and market insights. And that's what we're seeing great evidence of. They are being customer forward in how they're choosing to talk about themselves, but it requires them understanding the market and where it exists as well. Where is there confusion? Where can we create clarity? So you don't just good messaging doesn't occur in a vacuum. It occurs very much within the context of customers' understanding and what's happening in the market. The second foundational principle is strategist. So what are we trying to do? Where are we trying to grow? Is it in the low end of the market and the high end of the market? And in this case, we can assume it's both. And if you scroll down the page, they have a whole section on developers. So we know those are critically important. Strategically, they're covering all those bases. Then the third principle is around the storytelling, which is the messaging, the positioning, all of those aspects. It isn't just one of those things. But again, you need those other two in place to know which stories to tell. So the fact that they talk about from startups to Fortune 500, an integrated suite of payment products, and the best APIs, the easiest to implement APIs for developers, that tells us those are the different story elements that I think are crucial to say, and then they develop the messaging against that. Again, always very far forward. What is it that our customers, those particular audiences, need to hear? And then last but not least is evangelism. That's the fourth foundational principle. And that's what's the foundation that makes it easy for other people to talk about us. And this is where the language and the evidence that they just have there right on the page, they're showing a lot of different examples of the product. Those are examples of what you're doing to enable evangelism.
Is the notion of vocabulary, something key, like to be able to use words that are the ones that people would use naturally? Is that a core concept of product marketing?
It's a core concept of what I think separates strong product marketing from the average. And I don't know what happens. I see this all the time in the workshops that I teach. Some bit flips in our brain and we go into marketing mode and we start to use category language, more technical terms that might be technically correct, but less clear to a customer that's trying to parse, well, what exactly is this going to do for me? And so, yes, I think word choice, being extremely intentional about it, is crucial, and really thinking hard about how can the customer process this? What is it that they want to hear? It's actually much harder than people realize to simplify things and to use more evocative language that is also simple. One trick that I actually learned in writing my book was think about writing in an 8th grade level. You can still use sophisticated words, but that's going to make it unilaterally understood by all. You're not dumbing it down, but you're making the language quickly approachable and easy to read and easy to parse.
There is something funny I observed over my experience regarding the use of customer-centric language is that not only, of course, it helps your customers understand what you're trying to do, but sometimes that may be the only internal common language that everyone will understand. And usually when there's someone who starts to talk in a bit of a technical way, without realizing it, other people within the company already might be excluded, and then there's a risk of misunderstanding about what we're trying to achieve that is way higher than if we're actually talking in the customer language, it's very unlikely that there's someone who doesn't understand words that would be understood by the customer. So it feels like there's an extra benefit, from an internal perspective in terms of alignment of actually taking the customer view on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. You'll always be understood if you're using the customer's language.
I'm curious about. So I wrote a book recently, and there's something that was very surprising to me about the exercise of writing a book, which was by the act of writing, you understand better the topic that you thought you understood something about it, but having to write about it actually makes you discover that there were entire things that you were not very clear about, or not as clear as you are by the end of the book. Did this happen to you? Like, are there concepts or articulations or notions that by the moment that you were actually ready to publish, they were clearer than what you thought they would be at the beginning of the first draft?
Absolutely. The writing of this book was very much a product management exercise for me. Like the first draft took me about a year to get to, and then it took me another 8 to 9. Actually, it took me 10 months to get to the draft that I actually turned in. And by the end, I had cut 9,000 words, 8 chapters. I had rewritten it many times over. And I myself was guilty of the first time around. I did rely on jargon and didn't realize when I was relying it because I was so clear on what I meant. Then I put it out to some trial customers and I had them review it and I had them rate it. How clear was this? And did you find it compelling? And I just got schooled because I would say, like, I would literally write a sentence like, it's very clear why this is better. And someone would say, no, it isn't at all, where I would look at it and say, it's obvious. And I realized I actually have to explain things more than I realize and really break this down into much more fundamental, easy to understand concepts. So it forced me to get really crystal clear for someone that doesn't understand any aspect of this. But I also think it made it stronger. It also made me utterly ruthless at taking anything out that wasn't clarifying a concept, driving towards, increasing someone's knowledge, or telling a story that made a concept clear. And I just cut. By the end, I was totally ruthless.
Okay. I was curious about the title of your book. So two questions. Maybe the first one would be, why did you choose "Loved" as the title of your book?
This was actually in partnership with Marty Cagan. So his initial book called Inspired: How to Build Products Customers Love, that was actually something he and I came up with in partnership. And so he, of course, was one of my big readers and reviewers. And he's like, Martina, I think I have the perfect title for your book. How about calling it Loved? And I was like, can I? Because it kind of connects our 2 books. And I was like, if you're okay with that, I would love to do that. So, and then the rest of it was obvious. But then also how to rethink marketing for tech products. Part of how that came about was because product marketing is so misunderstood, we didn't want to have product marketing in the title. We wanted people to realize that it's really, you need in order to get to the marketing outcomes you want, there really needs to be in tech a strong product marketing foundation. And so making people think of that first, as opposed to saying, hey, here are product marketing principles, which, to your point, means something different in every single company.
Okay. Can I offer an alternative title?
Sure.
After reading your book, I was wondering if a word that would be maybe even more precise was the word adopted. The reason I'm saying this is because it does feel like the whole book is around how do you ensure adoption of the product that you're actually going to put on the market. Would that be too big of a simplification to focus on the notion of adoption?
I think that's a really great simplification of what's the purpose of product marketing, which is you're trying to make sure that whatever product is being built is getting adopted. So I would say that's great in terms of clarifying the purpose of product marketing.
Okay. There's one question that came up when I was trying to get a sense of what would be interesting for our listeners today. One question was, I'm a product manager, in a company that either cannot afford to hire a full-time product marketing manager, or at least there's no one around who is going to be officially tasked to work on product marketing. As a product manager interested by this topic, and maybe who's listening today, what are the things that are within my range of ability that I could start to do tomorrow in order to help my company become better on this particular discipline?
Yeah. Well, if you think about the four foundational principles of product marketing, it's really like what can you do to help build that foundation and make it clear to others in the rest of the organization? So on the ambassador front, can you clarify who the target markets are? You probably built a persona if you're on the product side. Who are those personas? What are the key attributes? What is happening in their market that might shape the market reality of that person? So not just the attributes that you're building against, but what's the market reality that's influencing them? That then helps with creating the strategy. So the strategist aspect. What are the key things that are influencing their environment that might help shape the key activities that you would do to bring the product to market? So you might not think of all the things or know everything, but key external things might be holidays that are driving actions or periods of time. So if you're a finance product targeting accountants, when is tax time? Or if you are an infrastructure product, a major show so a big one here is reInvent that happens every November. Or if you're developing things for the iOS ecosystem, Apple's new announcements and the release of the updated versions of iOS, those are on predictable cadences now. Those will impact your business and the environment in which your product is coming. Those are the things that lay the foundation for when you do what you do, and then why. That's also something that you want to have clarity on before you decide on the what. So that's the key exercise in the strategist component. And a product manager will know both of those things, those key market things, and why should we be doing what we're doing? Let's connect it to the business and the product that we've built. Then, of course, with the storytelling, the messages, the key messages. So you might start off with like, technically, here's what we do. But then if you have customer conversations, so in doing product discovery, you will often hear exactly the words that the customers use back to describe what it is you're doing. That is solid gold for developing strong messaging. And a question I encourage product teams to always ask in product discovery is, how would you describe this to a colleague? And then you're hearing the language that they use to describe it to someone that is a knowledgeable peer. That's, even if you're doing it or if someone else is doing it, you want that language, and that's super duper helpful. And then, of course, the evangelism stuff, as a product manager, you are seeing pockets and observing places where people are particularly excited and leaning into the product, or say, oh my gosh, I really love this. This is what it's doing for me. Those are things that you'd want to then elevate so others can see and know, oh, this is something people really like. So those are all things that someone that sits in the product seat can be fantastic at.
Then a follow-up question on this particular situation, which is, okay, I understand as a product manager what I could do in order to help my company become better at product marketing. However, it feels like there's always a huge question mark, which is the lack of adoption that my product is getting towards its target audience, is it because we suck at product marketing? Or is it because our product is just, not the right one or built in the wrong way? How can you tell?
So this is where I think doing some market tests where you're interrogating and understanding where is it breaking down? Is it that the product is, so if you're doing NPS or anything like that, or a Sean Ellis test that says, hey, how disappointed would you be if this product was no longer available in the market? Those are things that test the product. That being said, we'll use the Sean Ellis test as a great example, where more than 40% of people say they'd be very disappointed if the product no longer existed. Same exact product, but messaged differently, can all of a sudden meet that 40% threshold. So you have to experiment to understand which is it? Is it the product, or is it how it's being framed by the messaging that is creating a different expectation that makes people not like this so much? So a great example there is my husband used to be head of product for a company called Lookout. And they did the Sean Ellis test. They weren't reaching 40%. They just changed the description in the App Store to emphasize free antivirus because that's what people cared. Oh, that's something I need versus just something I might want. Just making that shift, then let them clear that Sean Ellis threshold. So those are examples of it's probably not just one versus the other. The messaging setting the frame in which the value gets someone is deciding whether or not it's valuable, and then the product is delivering, either delivers or doesn't deliver against that value. So it's always going to be some combination of both.
Are you saying that sometimes potentially you have in your hand a product that has certain qualities, and the reason why it's not getting an adoption is because the way it has been, brought to the market is potentially to the wrong audience or with the wrong positioning, so that the match between the audience and the product is not getting there. And maybe you need to. There's definitely an issue of product market fit, but it's the making it fit to the market that is the issue, and potentially the product is doesn't need to be fundamentally changed, right?
Yes, and some people call that go-to-market fit, and there are many people that argue go-to-market fit these days is more challenging than product market fit. They're both challenging, but because there's so many products in market, it's very confusing no matter what you're trying to do, that people are understandably very confused. They're like, well, these three things all look the same, they seem the same. So actually, I think you and I spoke about an example with, since we're streaming live, but podcasting, and how the two giants in this space say exactly the same. The easiest place to have studio quality recording. So it's all about easy and simple. Everyone's orienting around that. And Podcastle, Upstart, started there saying, well, we're saying the same things. And then they realized when they went back and they looked at their customers, actually, it's now easy to record a podcast, but the harder part is figuring out the story that you want to tell. So they changed their messaging, same product, to one-stop shop for broadcast storytelling, studio quality recording, AI-powered editing, seamless exporting. That one shift totally changed all the conversion on their website. Same product, but they shifted the emphasis towards storytelling versus making it easy to record. And that made a huge difference for them.
If we get technical about this, would you say that this is a matter of what positioning, like the way they position their offer was slightly different? Is that how would you qualify it?
Yeah, I would definitely say they changed their messaging, and the positioning was around storytelling versus the ease of recording the podcast.
There's one question that comes up a lot regarding the role of product marketing managers in the discovery process. And you were mentioning earlier how much discovery can be a moment where you're able to capture the words that are actually the natural words that people would use in order to describe your product, and that would be gold for you to potentially reuse as a way to describe what you're offering. But more generally, in the discovery phase, what would be the role of a product marketing manager, and maybe in a position or complementary to either a product designer or a product manager? How would you describe the potential roles and responsibilities that would establish in this particular phase?
So this is shaped very much by the stage at which the company is at. So at Costanoa Ventures, where I'm a partner, we work just with early stage companies. And so there, typically, you don't have someone that has the role of product marketer. You have a founder, someone that's in product, someone that might be sort of like side hustling the product marketing stuff. And they work as the scrum team that's trying to figure this stuff out in real time. And it's making sure those questions get asked during the product discovery process, but then also trying to apply it into how you are sampling the market. The very next time someone is having a sales conversation, we're putting it in the slide deck. Let's actually trial that messaging and see how people lean in, see if it resonates with them, or ask them at the end, and how would you describe this to a colleague? Do they parrot the messaging? Or do they use something totally different? That's market signal that the person acting as product marketer then needs to take that, metabolize it, translate it into what appears on the website or what appears in the ongoing materials that get developed. So that's the person acting in that function is very rapidly iterating the material to try and figure out exactly what it is until we've landed on the positioning and the messaging that we think we can stick with. But there's a tremendous amount of iteration. At a later stage company where the roles are a little bit more defined, how those teams will interact will be much more around how are we prioritizing what we are shipping this week, whatever the cadence is for release cycles. Is it this week? Is this month? Is it today?
Yeah.
Making sure that the customers, that's where the ambassador part, customer market realities are entering into how the prioritization will occur. Many product teams to say like, all right, here's our backlog. How are we prioritizing this week? The product marketer there will say, hey guys, this is what we're noticing in the market. We're slowing in adoption in this key segment. Are there any things that we can do to elevate or prioritize something that's going to target this segment? And there they have a dialogue around how product decisions can impact what's going to hit downstream in market. So that's what would typically happen at a company where the roles are more mature and the product might be more mature.
Okay. Expanding on that, when I was reading your book, one question came to my mind, and it might be a bit of a provocative question regarding the future of those two roles, product manager and product marketer. Let's assume that, in the future, the ownership of the delivery is, fully on the engineering side. And we have, strong, tech lead engineering managers that are really able to drive the delivery phase. Would you imagine a world where product manager and product marketers actually just, are combined? And in a way, the more a product manager is able to kind of, hand over the delivery on the engineering side, the more they can focus on the many things that are described in your book. I'm just trying to understand whether or not those two roles are a moment in the history or just, something that will actually be combined together. And actually what you're describing in your book, maybe the future of what product managers are going to become.
I feel like the roles are both so important and different enough that I can't imagine, and huge that I can't imagine them ever being combined.
Okay.
And there's so much, the foundation is massively overlapping, but then how both roles make manifest in the sort of like 50%, like what are the actual activities and assets we're creating on the go-to-market side. That's a huge portion of the person holding the role of product marketer. And similarly, the product manager, a huge amount of the job is making sure that the right product iteration, like the smartest way of developing the products and those conversations are happening within that core team. And there's just so much management, not just delivery management, but management of that process, pushing of the landscape of possibility of ideas that are being considered. That's the product marketer will have nothing to say about that, but the product manager needs to make sure, hey, are we considering enough? Are we being creative in how we're approaching the problem solving here that we're trying to build product against? So the massive overlap is in the foundation from which they make thoughtful decisions, but then the areas in which they enact that are completely and totally different.
Okay. At TIGA, we offer a product marketing training, and there's one question that comes up a lot actually on this topic, which is we talk a lot about the duo between the product marketer and the product manager. We don't talk as much regarding the relationship that you could imagine between a product marketer and a designer, for example, or between a product marketer and a developer. Would you have any particular thoughts on those relationships that may not be at the forefront of what a product marketer does? However, it feels like it's part of the same ecosystem that you could proactively work with.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say as for a product marketer and how they might benefit from a partnership with a product designer, that's very much like how do we think about the experience that someone is having through our product? And how might that influence how we should be talking about it? So that's one where there's massive learning potential. I know for myself, I really got into usability studies and everything like that, working with designers. And that's where I had these huge epiphany moments watching ordinary or self-appointed advanced users stumble through activities. And I'm like, wow, these guys think they're advanced. And I look at them and I would say they're beginner in how they're interacting with the product. But that was something I learned by working closely with designers. And as it relates to engineers or developers, same thing there too, which is it's easy to talk about what our product is doing or why it's technically interesting. If you partner well or have really good friends inside of the engineering organization, it lets you deeply understand the technology in a way that then will let you simplify it or make it that much more impactful in terms of how you talk about it, because you understand this different level of depth that makes you want the world to understand how great what you've built is at a level of detail that isn't possible if you don't go really deep technically. So I think those are beautiful, wonderful relationships to have. They might not be core to how you get what you do done, but they're essential context to make you, that I'd say would differentiate someone who is pretty good at the job from someone who is truly excellent.
Okay. If you look back at your own career as a practitioner, what moment comes to your mind where you felt like on the product, marketing discipline, you really brought some value to a particular project or company, like a moment of pride where you're like, okay, this is really something that no one else than someone with the right product marketing mindset could have brought so much value to the table. Is there a particular moment or story that you could share with us?
Well, one of those stories was that working in partnership with product management around when Word 95 came out, and we basically were going out with half the number of features that we had with the prior version, and we were trying to convince the world, yeah, this is a much better version than the last one. And this was in an era where features, the pure feature count, was how people would judge products. And we basically looked at this study that had captured every keystroke of every user and saw that the vast majority of keystrokes inside of a word processor were just in 4 basic categories. And we constructed a story around how do people actually use word processors, and where does every level of user from beginning to advanced actually get the most value, is actually in these 4 really basic categories, like things around formatting and file management. And of course, most of the features that we were enhancing were all in those areas. So it was a fit and finish version of the word processor, but we made everything much more meaningful by the context that we set. And part of what I brought at that stage was how we told that story. And I know this seems like the smallest thing. We did not use PowerPoints. This was Microsoft. And we did not use PowerPoints because I said, we can't use a PowerPoint because then people are just their eyes will glaze over and they'll be like, oh, they're just giving me some like song and dance. It's going to feel like marketing. And I said, we have to go in there with a whiteboard, pen and paper, and we have to engage in a dialogue, and we draw this with them and we engage with them directly. So it wasn't just the story we were telling, but it was how we chose to tell the story. It made them, they didn't expect that from Microsoft or from a product manager at Microsoft. And so they listened differently. And that was a piece of the product marketing that we did that made it so successful, was not just the story that we told, but how we chose to tell the story. And at the time, that was the most commercially successful version and most critically acclaimed version of Word at that time.
Wow, that's a great story. You were mentioning, your experience at Microsoft. I'm wondering if earlier I was asking you about, what from the outside can you use as a way to understand whether or not you're talking to a product marketing mature company. Now, from the inside, if you were to get in a company, what are the things that you would pay attention to get a sense of how this company is doing from a product marketing standpoint, whether from a organization standpoint, from a process standpoint, from a culture standpoint, maybe things that I'm not even mentioning? What are the clues that you would be attentive to get a sense of, okay, where do we stand here in terms of product marketing maturity?
So I think the number one thing that I would look for is does the product team feel like their product marketing partner is essential in how they do their job? Like that's the ultimate tell that is an organization that's effective at leveraging both positions, because both should feel like they're necessary for the company to succeed. If again, especially in tech, that's something that's very unique to tech, because product is the engine. The technology products that we're building is the engine for growth of the company. So that's the number one tell. And then I'd say second is, are the biggest business initiatives of a company, are product marketers key in enacting those? If it's just, and marketing's doing this stuff and sales has a bunch of spiffs, then product marketing is not a strong function. But if the most important things, hey, we need to shift to a suite of products and a different target segment, and we need to grow the percentage of sales in that target segment, and product marketing is leading the helm, then you know it's really strong.
Okay. It's funny you're mentioning the enormous importance of product in tech, because when you take a step back and you look at the history of marketing, product was part of the marketing mix. You had product, price, place, and positioning, and promotion, sorry. And it feels like in the tech world, product kind of emancipated itself from the marketing realm. And now we have product marketing as a discipline that is trying to bring it back together. I'm just wondering, why do you think, looking at the long view, why did this product entity, became something separated from marketing? And second, why today do we feel so much the need for, bringing those two brothers and sisters, together?
So I would say what was unique about tech, and why product might have felt like it was had to emancipate itself, is in the early days of tech, building a product was enormously difficult and extremely technical. And over time, we now have millions of technology products. And in the beginning, we had like hundreds, maybe thousands. And they were difficult to understand. And most people didn't use technology in their everyday life. So it was logical that it's like, hey, geniuses are going to create these products, and then we have to figure out how to bring them to market. So it's logical that it was separated at the beginning. And that's a huge legacy of what we bring into where we are now. Now we're in an era where every single person every day uses technology nonstop. That's kind of like, think about your average supermarket, and you use those supermarket consumer goods every day to get through your life. Now technology is at that level. So it is a different landscape. And if you look at consumer packaged goods, how marketing forward they are, where it's like, hey, we have this product, but we have to think about the market. That's where we are with technology today. Every market is super dense. Everybody understands the role technology will play in their life. We don't have to talk about that anymore. And so now it's just this huge market battle where, of these 5 things that look very similar, how does one stand out above the other? And in the marketplace where I'm typing in a Google search and it's telling me, here are the 5 things that look similar. Then I go to comparison site. I see 5 more, and something I never even heard of is way more highly rated and has many more reviews. How do I, as a human, process all this information? All of that's the go-to-market side. All of that's the marketing. And so that's why product, it has to be back in the fold, because it's kind of like, you can have the best product, but if the world doesn't understand what it is or how it compares or contrasts to any of these other things, it will not matter. And so that's why marketing has become so much more important in the current era.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective. If we're trying to look at one hot topic we have in the community regarding artificial intelligence, what do you have any perspective on that topic and its impact on product marketing? Like, as a product marketing expert, why should I care about the emergence of something like chatbots that allow you to tap directly into incredibly powerful artificial intelligence behind it? Are there already practices that you've seen that could be interesting for people to look into?
I think the last 5 to 10 years, what's been happening on the AI front is just unbelievable and incredible. And I think we're figuring out, what is the impact of this going to be on our lives? But I will say, you already have that level of AI powering when your Uber arrives, what Google search results you get served, when you talk to your Google Home or your Alexa, what it says back, when Siri replies, the calculations of the routes. We're already using AI so much in our daily lives on our little computers in our pockets. And you'll notice that all of those examples don't talk about, and it's AI powered search or it's AI powered commerce. But that's what we're experiencing in the best product experiences. So what I'll say is it will be a means to an end. And in the best cases, we simply won't know that that's what's happening. Like, if I believe there was a Google engineer that said, like, I think Google search is sentient. I mean, we don't know. We couldn't tell you why it is turning up, giving you the results it is. It has just been tuned and it is learning on its own. So it's already impacting us in a major way in ways that are invisible. And I do believe that in the future, it will be scary, but it won't be visible. It will just be increasingly excellent product experiences.
So what you're saying is that the benefits that are coming from AI, we should be talking about those benefits basically, not about how they were brought to life through advancement in technology, right?
Yeah, it will just be, I think it'll just be a means to an end. And most people won't be aware that how much AI might have powered this. Medical devices is a great example there. Huge jumps and leaps in the improvements of AI in the medical arena to be predictive or get close to clinician outcomes. When you get a radiogram reading, will you know that it was a computer did it that versus an actual human radiologist? At some point you might not, and it might not matter. It might be more accurate that it was done by a machine. And that's just, I don't know when that threshold is going to occur, but it's going to happen at some point.
Okay. I want to come back to a very specific situation that a lot of people have been asking me about. So at TIGA, we have a lot of product marketing experts, and they, come in and help out in many companies that are discovering the value of product marketing, and they don't have the expert in-house. So that's why they rely on companies like TIGA to help them out with that. And on the flip side, those internal, coaches or consultants, they sometimes wonder, when you're coming in as the first, expert on product marketing, what are the first things you should do in order to, per your words, evangelize? Do you have any, very actionable tips or things that are maybe, mundane, tasks that actually have a huge leverage in order, to get a transformation get going and to maybe flip people's mind and change perspective?
Yes, I have two very specific tactical suggestions. Number one is when someone like that comes in trying to bring about change, you have to point out what you're trying to make better explicitly. Here are 4 things that weren't working well. And as a result of me being here, here's why it will be different. So people know what to look for as the indication that that person being there is making something that was a problem better. Just standing it up without that doesn't help them see that something that was broken is getting fixed. So that's very important thing number one. Thing number 2 is whatever work that you are coming in to do, make sure that it is strategically important. Because if you're doing this on some side project that no one thinks is important, it actually won't matter or have impact. So make sure that you're taking the time to solve it in a way that is actually having strategic value to the company writ large. Those 2 things I think are really critical.
Okay. And I want to follow up on this one. For a long time, the topic of product-led companies was highly coming from tech companies, that were digital native companies. They started as a tech company, but more and more we're seeing more traditional companies that came a bit late in the battle, but discovered that there's no way they're going to be successful if they don't embrace this revolution coming from software. And the reason I'm bringing this up as a context is that it feels like those companies are coming with a very different culture, and so the tech is a new thing, or a recent thing. Let's say best practices regarding product management is something that happened very recently. product marketing is like, really it's the last thing on the frontier. And the reason why it might be even more tricky is because those sometimes very traditional companies have very strong marketing teams that are very far from IT. That's the word they would probably use, right? Is there anything specific about this context that could modify the way you would approach product marketing?
That is, Remy, that is such a great question and an important and really big challenging arena for product marketing to succeed at. And I think the key question to ask in that specific scenario is, if we set up the function of product marketing, where will it best succeed? Should it be closer to product or should it be closer to marketing? In that specific instance, I would suggest that if there is a modern product organization that is developing and creating product in that different, more modern way, then product marketing should be closer to product. Because if it just went into marketing, it'll just become this glorified translation layer for the rest of the marketing engine to do what it wants to do. It needs to bring forward and illuminate and create leverage in a way that wasn't before possible, with this new way of doing product, for product marketing to be visible as not just a way of getting the technical stuff from the product team out into the rest of marketing. So in that scenario, that's how I would suggest it grow up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have a question that is actually a puzzle that I have, and I'd like to see if you have, a potential answer to it, which is, there's two mantra of product teams that I think no one is paying attention to the fact that they're totally antagonists. So one mantra is, and Marty Cagan could be the voice of this, is like, we need autonomous, empowered teams, right? We need those teams to be, to have as much autonomy as possible, because this is how you get, speed and excellence. On the other hand, we're also constantly talking about how we want, end-to-end experiences to be flawless and to be, precisely, seamless. To me, it feels like those two things could actually be partially contradictory, visions to go after, because the more autonomy you give to specific teams and the bigger the organization you're going to be into, the more it's possible that those autonomous teams are going to take decisions that are going to actually make sense from their perspective, but break a flawless, seamless, end-to-end experience. Do you believe that product marketing can play a role in resolving, this notion of autonomy on one hand and this notion of seamless end-to-end experience on the other?
Yes. Oh, you're asking such great questions. And I would say, so let's take the exact scenario that you had. Mature company, they finally developed like these great autonomous empowered teams. And let's say the product marketing started helping to give birth to that new way of looking at things. This is where you might then shift things to the marketing side, where it's like, hey, how this is going to market, how it's experienced, how we're making decisions so that this makes sense for how we need to grow as a company and be seen to enhance our market position. That is really happening and being driven by the marketing team and or the marketing side, the go-to-market side. So this is where product marketing, looking at it from the market perspective, can be incredibly influential in helping to shape, okay, product teams, we can't go at it as 14 separate entities. This needs to be a unified experience. And right now it's being experienced as 14 different things. People want to deal with us as one company. We want to have an integrated way for them to license the technology from us, and much easier way to price this. These are all the things that would fall underneath product marketing, and it then should justly influence the product decisions and say, guys, this is too individualized against 14 different products, which might come from, we'll say, 200 empowered product teams. For our audience, it is this designated target with these two adjacent things, and it has to be simplified so that we can talk about 3 things and 3 things only. So you guys can figure out what the solution is, but this is how we need to be able to talk about it, because it's going to be too confusing otherwise to the market relative to all the other things we're competing against. So that's where the product marketing team really helps to drive some of the conversations in prioritization around how the product teams are making their decisions and trade-offs.
Okay. I want to thank you for the compliment regarding questions, but also be very honest about the fact that actually, as we're talking, some of our viewers are suggesting some questions that I'm taking on the fly. So to be honest, it's actually a group exercise to come up with a question that would make sense both for the whole community and for yourself. And we have Hortense, our product marketing leader at Tiga, who has been helping me prepare a lot. We have Valentin and Stéphane that asked very interesting questions. I have one last question from Matthias, and I think we may end on this one. It may be a tricky one, so let's see if this is something that would resonate with you. It feels like there's another kind of paradox regarding product marketing, which is on the one hand, you want to you want to fit into categories that already exist in the minds of the consumer. You want to leverage words and vocabulary that are familiar to them. So that's on the one side. On the other hand, you want to stand out, you want to be unique, you want to be differentiated. How do you balance those two opposite traction?
So, again, great question. A couple of things immediately come to mind. One is you absolutely stand out when you are clear. when you talk about what you do in a very clear and simple way. I mean, all the examples that we talked about, they are not the only ones in category, but their messaging is just really, really clear. And that turns out to be a very unusual thing. So that's one thing to know. But the second is you can develop language around category beyond talking about the category itself. So this might be a technique as you're trying to push and evolve a category. So Elation is a company that in its early stages, it was trying to establish a new category around enterprise data catalogs. And instead of just hammering, there's enterprise data catalogs, everybody needs one, they started talking about the tribal knowledge that people that are in the business analyst position have, but isn't codified. So if one person passes on their work to another, they don't necessarily know and understand where these numbers came from, where the data came from. And by talking about the problem and that tribal knowledge, that is what helped people understand, oh yeah, you do kind of need a way of cataloging, understanding that stuff so you can interrogate it, figure out lineage. And that's what helped people understand the need for something that could then be a new category. But they developed a language. Tribal knowledge was how they described that stuff that people know that doesn't get passed along. Everybody started to adopt that same language, and that also helped build and shape the category that they then formed. So you can develop language that is unique, that is not just around how you describe your product, but how you are describing the broader problem that you are solving. And that's a great example of that. You can stand out by how you shape the market context, not just by how you talk about your product.
Okay, thank you for trying to explain this one, because this one is way clearer right now. Martina, we've been chatting for almost an hour now, and it's been a real pleasure. Is there something that maybe you wanted to share with the French community that we didn't have the time to cover yet?
Well, I hope to be able to see you guys in person sometime later this year, but bonne chance.
Thank you. Merci.
I truly hope that you guys set a bar for the rest of Europe. You have a head start because you got a Bible translated, and it would just be great because I know that product marketing is a newer discipline in how it's being practiced in Europe, and it's always great to have examples for others to learn from. So please be that example, and please share your stories.
So for sure, we'll try to look for ways to have you come over to Europe and in France in particular. And until then, if there are people listening to us today that that are craving for help, we have a lot of experts at Tiga that would love to be able to host small and big companies alike regarding product marketing. So let's be in touch. Thank you so much, Martina, for being with us today, and looking forward to meeting you in person whenever you come to Europe.
Oh, Rémi, it's been a pleasure. Superb questions, and I really look forward to hearing of the success stories out of France.
Sounds good. Bye, Martina.
Bonsoir.